Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to be talking with Tom Brown today. He's one of our coaches on the Exponent Marketplace. If you're not familiar with the Marketplace, it is a platform designed to connect you with providers who can help you from personal problems to professional problems to questions of faith. And Tom is one of our professional coaches on the Marketplace. He's actually worked with us a little bit at Exponent Group, and so we've really benefited from his expertise. And I'm excited to introduce you all to him today. So just a little bio introduction. Tom is the co-founder and managing partner of Redemptive, a coaching, consulting, and fractional support services firm that specializes in helping leaders increase their company's effectiveness so they can achieve their goals and create redemptive impact. Prior to this, Tom had a career in aviation as a mechanic, a pilot, and an instructor. He leverages this experience and organizational development and excellence to guide other leaders on their journey. Tom currently resides in North Carolina with his wife and 5 children. It's awesome. Thank you so much, Tom, for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Clay. It's really good to be with you.
I'd love for you to just start and share a little bit of your story with everybody watching. And kind of, I'd love for you to share how you kind of went from this career in aviation to starting Redemptive Brokenness, and what was that journey?
It was quite a journey actually going that transition. I found myself in my aviation career in some management and leadership roles that I wasn't anticipating along the way. They kind of landed. And in the process of that, had some really great support around me, loved that, but also saw the struggle and the difficulty that's there and the mistakes that I made along the way, and just the impact that it is when you have good support around you. And as I looked at other leaders around me, this thing began to emerge in me saying, oh, actually, there's got to be another way for us to do this. There's got to be a better way for us as leaders to really engage and to be supported and to be supportive to each other. So my wife and I left where we were and we moved back to the US, and we didn't exactly know what we were going to do, but jumped into this world of setting up redemptive brokenness, which is just about engaging with the brokenness of the world around you and inside of you as a leader, and then expressing that in your work and participating in the redemption that God is always a part of doing around us, and just doing that well and coming alongside people who have a heart to do that.
That's really incredible. So I know you talked a little bit about it kind of came from your personal experience of like seeing the opportunities for you to grow. So what did you, I don't know, how did you through that process realize that you had this passion or coaching for, or passion or interest in coaching and supporting others?
I'd say it kind of organically developed,
Yeah.
where it started with just the people that I was working with
Mhm.
and looking at what they were trying to do. And as their supervisor, saying, okay, how do I help them be more effective as leaders and as
Mhm.
managers? And so that kickstarted the process. And as I did that and saw like, oh, this is actually really great and very rewarding and effective to really come alongside people, then I started thinking, well, what would it be like to engage with people outside of my organization who don't have to report to me and who aren't saying like, oh yeah, and can really tell me, actually, that's not helpful. I started interacting with people externally and found that it was really fulfilling for me, really beneficial for them. And it kind of opened my eyes to this reality that there's a place for this role beyond just what sometimes people think of in consulting, where you come in, you write a bunch of reports, and you leave it all there for the person to actually go do the work by themselves. That when you come alongside somebody and you partner with them to accomplish what they're trying to do, it builds them up, and it's even then creates this broader sense of connectivity as we work together with each other. And so the more I did it, the more I just recognized I love doing it. And the more rewarding it became. And I said, okay, I think we're just going to keep going down this direction and see where it takes us.
That's awesome. Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about like how I know one of the things you really emphasize is operational excellence specifically with organizations. And so can you talk a little bit about how you define that and why operations and excellence in that are so key to the success of an organization, but also a leader?
Yeah. So, if you think about there's a couple different pieces with this. So on the one side, there's organizations, and if you think about groups that have lasted a long time, that have good retention, that have high employee engagement, that are profitable and impactful, you're typically not going to look at them and say they're kind of fly by night, a little bit shady, and I'm borrowing some of my old aviation language here, and sketchy, right? They run well.
Mm.
And there is this bigger picture, though, also of saying that us as humans, we have this innate wiring that is drawn towards things that are excellent, whether it's a piece of art or a beautiful sunset or an awesome architectural building or whatever it happens to be. When we're confronted with things that are excellent, it elicits a response in us because we have this internal thing that says, oh, that's how life's supposed to be. It's not supposed to be just haphazardly pasted together and made to do something. It's actually supposed to be good. This is how we were meant to be. And
Mm.
so when we operate like that as leaders, when we run things well, it builds something up inside of us that causes our both us and the people that we work with, our customers and our clients and everybody who interacts with it to have this little thing inside of them that goes, oh, this is really great. This is really good. And it creates both an internal personal fulfillment for the people that are a part of that, but it's also good for business
Mm.
because you get more done. You can be more efficient, you can be more effective. And whether your bottom line is profit oriented or whether your bottom line is impact oriented or some combination of those two, you really can't achieve those if you're operating ineffectively. And
Mm.
there is that opportunity to say, let's be more excellent in what we do. And we're going to create margin. We're going to create more profit. We're going to create more impact simply by being better at what we do. And so that's what I've seen is there's this huge opportunity to just say, okay, rather than focus on all this growth and scaling, sometimes we just need to say, let's just focus on being really good at what we have right now. And
Mm.
then we can decide with the margin and with the extra that comes, what do we want to do with that and where do we want to go? And is that looking like huge growth and huge scale? But you can't really go there if you're just trying to keep
Mhm.
things haphazardly stuck together.
Yeah. I think it's interesting you touched on how excellence kind of resonates almost like emotionally. Like it's like an
Mhm.
emotional like
Yeah.
thing. Is that something when you work with leaders, do you feel like there's a disconnect there? Because when I think of operations, it usually my first thought is like systems and it's very like it's not very cold or it is cold. It's like not as relational and emotional. So is that a disconnect that you see and how do you kind of help leaders make that connection?
Um, so I think a lot of times leaders have really intense and high levels of motivation and desire for excellence. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of leaders, they have the awareness and they want it, but
Mm.
there's the hustle that every leader is confronted with, especially in earlier stage and in high intensity growth stages as you move through different points in the organizational life cycle that just make
Yeah.
it really hard to focus on that because you're busy fighting fires. And as a senior leader, everything rises to the top.
Hmm.
All the stuff, all the problems that are being dealt with in your organization, it gets pushed up and you become a firefighter a lot of times. And
Hmm.
so it just crowds out. And so I find less of a disconnect where people say, oh, we don't need excellence, but
Mm.
more that they're just overwhelmed. And they're saying, yeah, I ideally love to be doing that, but I don't know how
Yeah.
because we're just trying to keep up and we're just trying to keep our head above water. And that's a really hard place to actually then build in more excellent things because it
Hmm.
feels like extra.
Mm. Hmm. How do you help a leader, yeah, realize this isn't extra, this actually is the key?
I think one of the really important things is recognizing that, like in any kind of a crisis situation, there is the immediate need for not letting the fire that's sitting right in front of you burn the house down. And so you
Right.
have to take care of those things. But then also being able to recognize and say, okay, there's probably always going to be fires,
Mm,
So, how do I begin to align myself and the people around me to where we can start looking beyond the immediate? And whether that's prioritization, knowing how to decide, yep, this is a close enough fire that we just got to focus on
mm,
it and we got to tackle it. But even asking questions, when you sit with people and you just get them to spend 30 minutes and say, okay, what would it be like? And you start to paint the picture of
mm,
what this could be like. And you ask them, what would it be like in your organization if things looked like this?
mm,
Right? It opens the door to this possibility. And through that, then we start to talk about, well, what are the reasons why you're not experiencing that right now? And help begin to reframe what is often this intuitive internal thought that I'm stuck and I can't get out. We want to
mm,
get out of that. We want to help leaders change that narrative and recognize that no, we can
mm,
get out, but you probably can't do it on your own. You
mhm,
kind of need help. And whether that's me or somebody else, you're going to need help along the way. And
mm,
so to begin to change that mindset and recognize that it's possible, and then just look for small little ways at the beginning that that can be done.
mm. Really good. So what are some of the main obstacles that you see get in the way of organizations trying to achieve operational excellence? They know they need it, but and I know you just talked a little bit about some of the fires, but what are some other things that you see?
Yeah, so a lot of times there's people stuff, there's process stuff.
Mm,
Sometimes those overlap in between. One of the big challenges is often, I'm not going to say it is the senior leader, but it is the internal stuff that the senior leader is either needing to deal with for themselves or
mm,
that the people around them need to deal with. Any people issue, there usually is more under the surface.
mm,
And a lot of times process issues or things that we think are process issues are actually people issues or alignment issues. So
mm,
there's the challenge of the senior leader having the capacity and the competency to do what they need to do to lead their organization well, and high motivation, all the best desire, all the best intent is really good and is needed. But it's very rare to have a leader who actually has the experience and the skill and the personality and the demeanor and the wiring and the capacity and all of that to handle everything that they're going to be faced with every single day.
mm,
But it's a lonely place to be at the top, and it's hard to know where to find help. So the leader themselves being bolstered to be more effective as a leader, that's one of the big issues. And then the other big issue is knowing, how do you align a team around this? How do you move out of, I'm a senior leader, and so I've got to make everything happen and get everything done and do it all,
mm,
to, okay, actually, I need to let go of some of these things and let other people around me do it. And how do I set up the processes? How do I set up the systems? How do I find the right people and bring them around me so that they can do it well? And it does go well, because
mm,
it's not helpful, right? We've all been in the situation where you delegate something and it falls apart and you think, I should have just done it myself.
mhm.
And it's very understandable and happens all the time, but that's like the worst enemy of building in efficiency and excellence.
Mm. So when you interact with the leader, like how often would you say that that it is actually, a personal internal issue, but they think it's a process issue?
I would say at least half of the time
Okay.
that's the case.
Yeah.
And oftentimes it is a process issue. And even where it is a process issue, once you fix the process, then it usually highlights where people's competency was adequate for what was happening before.
Mm,
But now the next
mm,
issue is a people issue because you
mm,
took care of the process. And so now you're running into the next ceiling. And so you hit these limits where you've got your limit with your process, and it's like, oh, we're stuck because this process has hit a ceiling. And
yeah.
so you fix the process. And now the process can move forward. Well, now you have another limiting factor over here of the person
Hmm.
in some capacity. And
Hmm.
whatever it might be, it's not that the person is bad or that they have these massive character flaws, but growth and change in organizations and people means that you're always going to be moving towards one of these capacity limits, either on your processes or on your people. And if you
Hmm.
take care of one, you're probably going to have the other one to deal with next. And
Hmm.
that's just part of the ongoing cycle of change and growth.
Yeah. So is it's almost like a positive thing, like if you are hitting a ceiling, because it can be easy to
Mhm.
see that as a challenge, but I kind of hear you saying like it can almost be a positive thing to see if you're hitting under the lid, like that means you are growing.
Yeah, for sure. If you're running into those limits, it is a
Hmm.
great indication because you've got now the opportunity to do something about it, to grow, to expand beyond where you currently are, whether that's with your processes or with your people. It's like your kid. When your kid is growing up, they grow out of their shoes and they grow out of their clothes. And then you have to get new ones. And it's not a bad thing. It's just, hey, we're growing out of what we had before.
Hmm.
And so your people hopefully are growing and your company is growing and your people have to grow with it and your processes have to grow with it. Whether
Hmm.
that's whether you're talking about size or just in effectiveness, it's
Hmm.
all a growth aspect that it is a positive thing.
Hmm. Hmm. Can you speak a little bit to, I love how you word this, like that your focus is on creating excellence to step into redemptive opportunities, and it's in the name, like redemptive brokenness. Can you talk a little bit about how that kind of redemptive perspective really drives the way that you work with organizations and leaders?
Sure. So, one of my foundational beliefs in this is that as people, we have brokenness. All of us have broken places inside of us.
Mm.
And that includes all the people that are around us.
Mm.
And one of our roles as leaders is to engage that and to participate in what God is doing to bring redemption out of that brokenness, to bring beauty out of what is not beautiful at first glance.
Mm.
So, as you ask about engaging in excellence, you can step into those opportunities. If you think back to that leader we were talking about who's fighting the fires and is just overwhelmed, it's very
Mhm.
hard to even consider
Yeah.
what's around me where there is brokenness and there is difficulty that I could do something about because you're just overwhelmed and you're trying to just stay afloat yourself. You can't actually go into that space of thinking about helping anyone else until you start to move forward yourself, which comes as you engage with your own stuff and as you build excellence into what you do. So, as you create that excellence, you create those efficiencies, it creates margin for you as a leader and it creates margin in your business.
Mm.
And a lot of times that turns into financial margin. And then you can look around and say, actually, you know what? Here's some ways that we could bless our employees that is above and beyond the requirements of the contract, but it's going to be good for them. And it's going to touch on areas where they've got pain points. And we
Mm.
can jump in that way because we have this extra capacity that we didn't have before as a
Mm.
result of becoming more effective and more efficient in what we do.
Mm. That's really, yeah, that's a really beautiful picture. And I think sometimes, at least some of the leaders I've interacted with, like I see them, even sometimes myself, like staying in this putting out fires, feeling like we need to own the problem mode. And I feel like you just touched on something really important there, that actually when we take the time to address the fires and create the systems and get to that place of excellence, it actually allows us to better serve our team and the people, our
Yeah.
clients, people we're trying to serve, because it opens up our perspective. Is that something that you see? Is that something that you see leaders and organizations that you work with struggle with?
Yes, it's a hard shift to think about sometimes, especially at the beginning, but it's really neat when it starts to happen.
Mm.
It's really cool.
Yeah. Do you have like a story or maybe something that like when we talk about this that really it's like the first thing that comes to mind for you, just kind of this picture of someone making that shift?
Yeah, it's actually somebody. an old mentor of mine that I worked for at one point in back in my aviation days. And he was taking over in a kind of a difficult situation and just had a lot. I mean, there were fires everywhere that he had to deal with. And he came in and he just, over the course of several months and a couple of years, I mean, which just tells you this takes time to be able to do these things. He just had this perspective of saying, we're going to focus on being good at what we do. We're going to focus on being excellent at what we do. We're going to draw the lines and we're going to say, this is how we are. This is how we behave. This is what we do. This is what we don't do. And as we do that, as we did that as an organization, it changed the way people function, right? It changed the way people interacted with each other in the hall. And then as people became more comfortable and effective at what they were doing, all of a sudden we got to have some conversations as a staff and say, wow, there's, we've changed as an organization. And he was very open and transparent with the staff to be able to say, hey, this is where we're at. Here's
Mm.
where we're at. And
Mm.
that can be discouraging sometimes when you hear like, this is where we're at and things really aren't great. But then at other times to say, oh, this is where we're at. And we've got some margin. And so actually, as the leader, I've decided to just open this door. We're going to give all of you this bonus, not because you like earned it necessarily. We could be setting it aside into our reserves and building that up and those things, but recognizing that it had been a hard season for a little
Mm.
while with the staff and that it would just be a really big gift and a blessing to them. And it just left an impression for me watching him do that and being able to see that, okay, in the midst of things still not being perfect,
Mm.
he was looking to say, how do we better the lives and how do we better the experience of the people that we're
Mm.
interacting with on a day-to-day basis?
Mm. That's really cool. That's a really cool story. How do you, I think when there are so many fires and maybe you're trying to figure out how do I be excellent and this one thing, what is some practical advice that you have to help a leader or organization maybe trim down what they're doing and not feel like it's a failure, I guess, to have to say we're going to do less so that we can do more? How do you help people get to that place?
Well, that's a really hard jump to make because as often as leaders, we have these internal feelings of it is a failure if I let go of this, or we see the benefit that something provided and we feel like, well, if I let go of that, then we're just going to be less than what we were. And I
Mhm.
love the analogy of gardening and pruning. And it's a great way to begin to shift that perspective to say that, okay, when you have a rose bush, you let it grow and it grows and it puts out beautiful flowers. And then the time comes when you need to prune it if you want it to actually grow and put out more flowers and more beautiful flowers in the next season, which means you go in and you cut off parts of the bush that are actually producing flowers now.
Mm.
But you
Yeah.
do it carefully. You look
Mm.
and you say, well, what's the best parts of this? And you cut off the parts that aren't. And
Mm.
that's a really hard decision to do. And it has to be done with a lot of care and intentionality because you don't just come in with a chainsaw either, right? The gardener, they come in with their hand snips and it's very carefully selected and done with care. So yeah, that mental mindset and perspective is one of the huge things that has to shift. And then having that clear alignment to say, okay, if we draw a line from all the things that we do, all the way back through our strategy to our vision, what's our North Star and that guiding thing for us? Can we connect the dots all the way back to each of the things that we're involved in? And what are the
Mm.
things that are most central and most important? And let's go ahead and guard those. And the other things, maybe it's time to consider not doing those or partnering with somebody else who can do those, that those things continue on, but we don't own them anymore, but we're involved.
Mm.
But that question you're asking, it's a really hard thing to navigate.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, but I love that image and that analogy. And even like you said, just kind of I had like that very it almost was like a constellation. Like we've got our North Star and then what are the lines connecting it? Yeah, it's really beautiful. Well, I want to respect your time here, so we'll wrap up soon. But I would love to just know what's one piece of advice that you would leave our listeners with.
Yeah, I would say, and I was given this advice in my early management days
Mm,
as a senior leader, to form a personal board around you as a leader. This is a
mm,
group of people, 5 to 7 individuals that you don't work with and that you don't have any official accountability to in terms of your job performance. But identify those people that are close to you, that care about you, that are willing to speak into things and that
mm,
you trust to speak into things. And then invite them to be a part of your life, invite them to interact with you, talk with them, be open and honest and transparent with them about the things that you don't share with anybody else, about what's happening in your work life and in your personal life, and allow them to speak into it. And that will pay huge dividends. It was,
mm,
yeah, life changing for me.
mm. That's really awesome. All right, well, I want to close out with some fun rapid fire questions. So these you can
Okay.
just tell me the first answer that comes to your mind, and they're just kind of fun get to know you questions. So the first one is, what is your go-to comfort meal?
So if I asked my wife that, she would say it depends on the mood he's in, which I am a bit of a moody eater, but I'm gonna go with tacos. Good old street tacos or a burrito is
Yes.
always a good go-to for me.
Yes, I am with you there. That is like, yes, my go-to comfort meal for sure. What is a book that has changed your life?
Yeah, that's okay. So there's a great book by David Benner. It's called Surrender to Love. I'm actually going through it again right now from the first time that I read it, and it's fantastic, and I would highly recommend it for anybody. It'll kind of blow some boxes off of some or blow some sides off of the boxes you might have created in your mind.
Mm, awesome. And then if there was like if you weren't doing what you were doing now, where would you be and what would you be doing?
Wow. Having a career in aviation, I would probably be somewhere in the aviation industry, maybe involved in drones. I
Okay.
love helping people accomplish what they're trying to do. And so that whole transportation logistics world has always been fun for me.
Mm, so cool. Awesome. Well, Tom, thank you so much for joining us today. If anybody watching, if you're interested in meeting with Tom yourself, we're going to link his profile at the bottom of this video. So you can go there, you can send him a message and schedule a time to talk with Tom yourself. But thank you again. We're really excited to have you on the marketplace and look forward to talking with you again soon.
Yeah, thanks so much.